Chadash, and I'm really happy to meet you and see everyone here. Thank you for coming. And I'm also inviting you to look at our additional programming outside on the table. We have another Yom Yun on Sunday for Yom Kippur. And that's it. We're going to start. Today's program, the Tzom Gedalya program, is dedicated by Pnina and Barry Farkash in memory of Seymour Wolf, Shalom Zeb Applebaum, and Abraham and Bracha Korobchinsky Applebaum.
It really is a zchut to be here as I look at so many faces and to be able to have an opportunity to wish you all a Gemar Chatima Tova, and especially to learn together this morning in memory of the Applebaums and a shiur dedicated by Pnina and Barry Farkas, who I'm sure all of us here appreciate for everything that you do for us and for our health and for the entire Kihila. And as we take care both of our physical nefesh and our spiritual neshama, we approach, as we know, not only these days of Aseret Yimei Teshuvah, but we're also approaching fifth elections. And I believe that as we take a look at some of the events that happened today, we certainly will reflect a little bit more efficiently on the reasons why we're fasting. But this morning, as we ended Rosh Hashanah yesterday with a commitment to not just convince HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but convince ourselves, as the Rambam says, B'zarchei HaTshuvah, that we're different people, that we are mishaneh our shem, or mishaneh our makom. And what that means is that we truly have to change our perspective. We have to change our interactions with people. We have to change how we look at this world. And therefore, this morning, we're going to try to apply some of what we learn to a change in the way that we're not only going to be observing and commenting on political events, but religiously refining our character. So let's take a look, a little bit of the background of the significance of today and why, in fact, we are fasting, why we said slightly longer slichot this morning, and why in Avinu Makinu we're all a little confused. Do we say Kotzvenu or Zachrenu? Because this is the one fast day where basically we have both, even more than Yom HaKippurim, clearly there, Chotzvenu, Chotmenu. But today we find ourselves both fasting for the Chorban and the day after Rosh Hashanah, a week before Yom HaKippurim. Zachariah basically gives us the answer as we find the Navi, the Gadol Hador, living at the beginning of the rebuilding of the second Beit HaMikdash. A delegation from Bavel, from Chutz La'aretz, comes, and apparently representatives of the Jewish community, albeit with Chutz La'aretz names like Beitel, Saretzer, Regemelech. And they come in the 4th year of Daryavesh, which we know is the year that is right in the middle of the rebuilding of the second Beit HaMikdash. They began in the 2nd year of Daryavesh, they finished in the 6th year. So knowing building projects in Eretz Yisrael, we can imagine that it's about, I'd love to say half done, but let's say a third complete. They see a shell of the Beit HaMikdash, and they ask Zachariah, as they come to the Beit HaMikdash, should we still be crying in the 5th month, alluding to the month of Av, teaching us that they were fasting Tisha B'Av for the past 70 years, as they say. Wait a second, Zachariah. We see that the second Beit HaMikdash is already being rebuilt. Is this one really going to be rebuilt? In other words, can we stop fasting now? And let's take a look at Zachariah's very ballistic response. Emor el kol ha'aretz v'lakohanim lemor, ki tzamtem b'safod b'chamishi u'b'shvi'i v'zeh 70 shana hatzum tzamatuni ani. He's speaking in the name of Hashem. And Hashem basically says, wait a second, that's what you're asking? You're asking, should we still fast? In the 5th and the 7th month, as we have been for the past 70 years, you think I've been fasting? Basically, Hashem says, you think that that's what it's about? You think that it's about losing calories after Rosh Hashanah? You think that it's about the fasting? That's what you want to know? You're asking the technical question about whether or not, now that we see the rebuilding of the Mikdash, we can stop mourning for the destruction of the previous one. And Zachariah goes along to say, well, it's not up to God. It's basically up to you. I don't know. Do you think this Beit HaMikdash is going to last? Are you going to learn from the mistakes of the past? But as we look at his initial response, we're a little surprised because they asked him with regard to Chodesh HaChamishi. They asked him whether they still have to mourn and fast on Tisha B'Av. And notice that what is Zachariah's response to this delegation coming from Babel? He says, Ha'ifke, kitzamtam b'safod b'chamishi u'b'shvi'i. They didn't ask about the Shvi'i. It's Zachariah who incorporates the fast of the 7th month of the Chorban. What fast is there? In a Chodesh HaShvi'i, in Tishrei, for the Chorban? The answer is Tzom Gedalya. He's not referring to Yom HaKippurim. He's referring to what they've been fasting only for the past 70 years. So this is a little strange. If I would ask you, again, what's the runner-up for the Tzomot of the Chorban? Right? They're asking about Tisha B'Av, and Zachariah says, why are you only asking about Tisha B'Av? You should have also asked for the fast of the 7th month. I would not have thought that Tzom Gedalya would be next in line after Tisha B'Av. I would have thought Shabasar B'Tammuz, maybe Asara B'Tevet. And generally today we say, what? This is a Tzom Kal. Right, it's good practice for a week from now. Right, what is this Tzom HaShvi'i that Zachariah is going to incorporate? So the Tosefta learns from here, Tzom HaShvi'i. Why is Zachariah juxtaposing the fast of Tisha B'Av to Shlosha b'Tishrei, Yom Shenarad bo Gedalya ben Achikam Sharagol Yishmael ben Netanya, Lelamedcha shekashem mitatan shel tzadikim lefnei hamakom kachorban Beit HaMikdash. To equate the assassination of a tzaddik like Gedalya with the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, basically he's saying they really are equatable. Don't just ask about the more universal, the national destruction. How about the personal murder of Gedalya ben Achikam? Sometimes we lose the trees for the forest. He said, you forgot that Gedalya was killed. But perhaps it's even more than that. As we look at the Gemara, we find a slightly different version than what's found in the Tosefta. The Tosefta says, Lelamedcha shekashem mitatan shel tzadikim k'chorban Beit HaMikdash. Right, as the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. The Gemara says, from Zachariah's incorporation, we learn the Lamedcha sheshkula mitatan shel tzadikim. Not only is it difficult, it literally is equal kisrifat beit Elokeinu, which is a much more active terminology, meaning killing a person, killing a tzaddik, is like you've actually burned down the Beit HaMikdash. But if we look at the broader context, we understand exactly the message that Zachariah is attempting to relay and to articulate to this delegation from Babel. And that is, remember that they're coming from Chutz La'aretz and they're asking, so is this Beit HaMikdash going to last? Can we in Chutz La'aretz stop fasting now? And what Zachariah wants to remind them of is that they're partially responsible for the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. As we review the events that led to the assassination of Gedalya, we're going to see that this assassination is going to end the vestiges of any Jewish settlement in Eretz Yisrael. Basically, what we're fasting for today is not just, a tzaddik was killed, but as a result of the assassination of Gedalya, there no longer is going to be a community of Jews living in Eretz Yisrael for the next 52 years. And therefore, he turns to the Jews who have not yet returned to Eretz Yisrael, and this is a very, very strong fast that should definitely be echoing in Chutz La'aretz. Shame on all those, says Zachariah, who haven't learned the messages of lacking settlement in Eretz Yisrael. What are you still doing in Chutz La'aretz? Let's take a look at the Malbim, who understands that this is what Zachariah is attempting to elicit from them, to have them do a little bit of tshuva. Ha'she'elah hevke b'chodesh ha'chamishi hi nazer ma shelo shalo al yetzer hatzomot. They were only thinking about Tisha B'Av. Zachariah says, you should be thinking about particularly Tzom HaShvi'i. Al harigat Gedalya lo nistaku klal. That they didn't have a suffix. That's a small fast. We can get rid of that one. Ki hatzom hazeh ba mipnei she'az necharav yishuv ha'aretz she'eshir Nebuzaradan tachat yad Gedalya midalat ha'am lekormim v'leogvim Nebuzaradan had allowed for the lower classes to stay in Eretz Yisrael and continue to take care of the fields and the vineyards. That would have allowed for infrastructure to be maintained in preparation for all those who would soon return to Eretz Yisrael. And it's because of Harigat Gedalya Barchu min haaretz v'achar she'ata hushav yishuv haaretz al mechono kivan sheshavu k'tat k'mispar shayam Gedalya in makom latzum hazeh. He basically is saying, you all think that, there isn't really a reason to continue to fast on Tzom Gedalya, but you're the reason why we have Tzom Gedalya. Why haven't you come back? You've left, and therefore there isn't an infrastructure that would have made return to Tzion much easier, says Zachariah Hanavi. And therefore, he says, אולם על לימוד צומות שהיה בעבור חורבן העיר והביא עליהם שאלו אם הבית הנבנה עתה יהיה גדול בכבודו ככבוד הבית הקודם ובטל הצום או לא. He said, you have lost complete understanding of what the fast is about. It's not about, now that there's a Beit HaMikdash, we can stop. The question is whether or not you've learned the messages. And you know what message you definitely have not learned? You in Chutz La'aretz have not learned the message of Tzom Gedalya, of the fast that led to the last of the vestiges of settlement of Eretz Yisrael, that could have provided for a greater sense of preparation for the return of Shavei Tzion. So with this, we now revisit the story a little bit more in depth. And as we take a look at the story, this is really, I'm going to say, one of the stories that brings to life not only modern day politics, but an understanding of the terrible Sinat Chinam that we generally associate with the destruction of the second Beit HaMikdash. We're going to see how the Navi, how Yirmiyahu describes how it was very present post the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash as well. So much so that even before the animated film Agadot HaChorban came out, and I always envisioned that some filmmaker is going to take this story and create a modern day version of the disunity and basically show the political tension. And then I realized that we don't need an animated film for this because we are living it right now. So let's take a look. And I'll open up Sefer Melachim, Ba'am Hanishar Ba'aretz, right after the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash. We hear that Nebuchadnezzar leaves some of the people for his own interest, by the way. This way the land can be taken care of. People will continue, those that are familiar with the agrarian aspects of the land, they'll continue to take care of the fields and be able to provide the Babylonian soldiers who are living here, be able to provide them with taxes in the form of food. So it was for everyone's benefit. Vayafked alehem et Gedalya ben Achikam ben Shaphan. And he appointed someone that we know from the family of Shaphan, who was alive even during the earlier times of Yoshiyahu, who was the scribe, who interpreted the Sefer Torah that Yoshiyahu found, and he's the one who warned him with regard to imminent destruction, and as a result, Yoshiyahu performs tshuva, which manages to deter, literally to push off the imminent destruction. We're also familiar with Achikam, who provided protection for Yirmiyahu Hanavi. And Yirmiyahu has been telling the people, perform tshuva, or else you're going to see the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. And finally he says, you know what, just surrender to the Babylonians in recognition that you've sinned. Understands that things will be better if you only surrender, because that will at least show that, as we know, hakara b'chet, that will show that you understand that you've sinned and that you're deserving of punishment. Unfortunately, as we know, the people continue to rebel. They allied themselves with the Egyptians, and as a result, the Babylonians come and destroy the Beit HaMikdash, something that Yirmiyahu says really could have been prevented had they only recognized that they deserve this level of punishment. So Gedalya is actually an ally, not only of Yirmiyahu, but he's been a pro-Babylonian supporter throughout. In other words, rallying the people to surrender to the Babylonians in order to ameliorate the levels of punishment. So it makes a lot of sense that this very distinguished young man is going to now serve as the governor for the remaining Jews in Eretz Yisrael. However, Pasuk Gimel, Vayishmol kol sarei hachayalim hema v'anashim ki ifkim melech Bavel et Gedalya. But there were other factions, different, one can even say guerrilla battalions, that were still attempting to fight the Babylonians even after the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash. and they hear that now they're allowed to stay in the land of Israel, and Gedalya is officially their political leader. Vayavo el Gedalya ha-Mitzpah, and Gedalya was placed in the northern areas of Binyamin and Mitzpah. Yishmael ben Netanyah, now we hear about the other political parties. One is led by Yishmael ben Netanyah. Another one is led by Yochanan ben Kereach, Usraya ben Tanchumet HaMitofati, another Yazaniah ben Hamachati, Hema ba'anshehen. And therefore one can argue that basically there were 5 political parties. We're laughing today because obviously there are many more, but 5 political parties led by Gedalya, Yishmael, Yochanan, Sraya, and Yazaniah. Vayishava lahem Gedalya u'lanshehem vayomer lahem al tiru ma'avdei hakasdim. And Gedalya sends the following nationalistic message. He says, it's in our best interest right now to simply surrender to the Babylonians. Don't be afraid of surrendering to them, because it will allow for us to stay in Eretz Yisrael. I know that it means already forfeiting the possibility of sovereignty, but we gave that up. He says basically 40 years ago in 605 BC when the Babylonians came and conquered. And therefore we may as well just and surrender entirely, but this way there won't be any aggravation, there won't be any aggression, things will be good for us. Now keep in mind that this is immediately after the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash in the month of Av. So he tells them, and basically in preparation, and for what it means, Shivu ba'aretz v'du et melech Babel, he basically is recommending to them in the month of Elul, now that they're harvesting their crops, make sure that you put some aside for the Babylonians. And now, after Elul, it's Tishrei. It's a month and a half after the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. V'hi b'chodesh hashvi'i, Chazal teach us any time we have a month without a date, it's Rosh Chodesh. It's Rosh Hashanah. By Yishmael ben Netanyah ben Elishama mizera hamlucha. Yishmael apparently is the strongest of all these because albeit Achikam and Gedalya ben Achikam ben Shaphan is also one of the officers of Yehuda, but Yishmael is from the actual line of monarchy. And therefore, according to Chazal, he felt a greater sense of arrogance, of pride, that he should really have been the one elected, but we're going to see that he doesn't share Gedalya's political views. He comes to greet Gedalya on Rosh Hashanah, what a beautiful Yom Tov Seudah, together with Asara Anashim Ito, Vayaku et Gedalyahu Vayamot, Bet Hayudim Bet Takastim Asher Hiyu Ito B'Mitzvah. And Sefer Melachim, we hear of a very abridged version of the story, one that we're going to see in a more elaborative form, told by Yirmiyahu Hanavi in his speeches of Yirmiyahu. But in the meantime, Yishmael assassinates Gedalya, and everyone gets up, and we're going to see why in just a little while, they go on their way down to Mitzrayim because they're scared of Babylonian retaliation. And sure enough, in the 37th year of Galut Yoyachin, we hear that Yoyachin is going to be pardoned, and things are actually good for the people in Babel, and we don't hear about anything going on in Mitzrayim. And Yirmiyahu is going to fill in the blanks and tell us what happened to all the Jews who ran away due to fear of Babylonian retaliation after the assassination of Gedalya. What happened to them? They were killed. There isn't going to be any remnant of that community, as opposed to those who were exiled. And earlier, as we know, 11 years earlier with Yehoiachin, things are terrible at the beginning in Babylonia, but in the end, that's going to serve as the basis for Jewish survival. These are going to be the people who ultimately return to Eretz Yisrael. So let's take a look at Yirmiyahu, which we know is replete with the religious speeches of Yirmiyahu Hanavi. And here he's going to give us a little bit more of the background to the political tensions and the religious messages that we're meant to extrapolate from the story of Gedalya. Hadavar asher haya Yirmiyahu meit Hashem, achar shalach oto Nebuzaradan rav tabachim ben Harama b'kachto oto. Keep in mind that Yirmiyahu was an eyewitness to the actual destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, but he had been held in chains by Tzidkiyahu the king, and he was taken that way, and that's how he was found on Har HaBayit at the time that the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. But the Rav Tabachim, the chief executioner, came to Yirmiyahu and he said, "Oh my, you're Yirmiyahu. You're that prophet who's been prophesying about the destruction. You've been very pro-Babylonian, encouraging the people to surrender." So, well, what do you know? Pasuk Gimel, Vayaveh vayas Hashem kasher diber ki chatatem laHashem. Everything that you said came true. Because your people have sinned to God, v'lo shamatem b'kolo, vayalachem hadavar hazeh. Vata hinei p'tachticha hayom min ha'azikim. Because you've been so supportive of us, I am going to release you from your chains, and I'm going to give you the following choice that the king said I should give you. Im tov beinach lavo iti Babel. You can come with us to Babel, and vasim et imi elecha ve'im ra beinach lavo iti, and come with me to Babel, and I'll take good care of you in Babel. Or if you don't want to, you know what, Yirmiyahu, you can choose wherever you want to live in Eretz Yisrael. You're going to be given royal treatment. Or go wherever you want. Where does Yirmiyahu decide to go? V'otenu lo yashuv v'shuva el Gedalya ben Achikam ben Shaphan. He doesn't leave the people. He could have finally retired in Netanya, and yet he decides to go with the people to Mitzvah, to Arei Yehuda, and he stays betoch ha'am. And sure enough, Pasuk Vav, Vayavo Yirmiyahu el Gedalya ben Achikam ha'mitzpata, vayeshev ito betoch ha'am hanisharim ba'aretz. Vayishma'u kol sarei hachayalim asher basadeh hema v'anshehem, and they're still in the fields. People are still battling against Babylonians. Ki yevkid melech Babel Gedalya ben Achikam. But once they heard that now there's a Jewish governor in charge, you would think that they would be excited. Ki yevkid ito anashim v'nashim b'tachmit alat ha'aretz kasher lo higla Babel. He didn't take everyone to exile in Babel. He left the lower classes. Vayavo el Gedalya hamitzpata v'Yishmael ben Netanya Yochanan Yonatan b'nei Kerech Sraya, and not the same people that we saw uvnei Ephai hanetofati v'Yizanya ben Hamachati v'Ilma v'anshehem v'Yishava lehem Gedalya ben Achikam ben Shaphan u'lanshehem limor al tiru mavod hakasdim. He says, I know you don't like this, and I know that you don't all share this political position, but let's surrender to the Chaldeans, to the Babylonians. Shvu ba'aretz v'du et melech Babel v'yitav lachem. I'm telling you that if you just stay here and you surrender to the Babylonians, things will be good. We can stay in Eretz Yisrael. It may not be ideal, but it will be good. And the reason why Gedalya can say this confidently is because Yirmiyahu has also delivered his famous nevuah that we read yesterday. Yirmiyahu Perek Lamed Aleph Kol B'Raman Nishman Hi V'Chitz Amurim Rachel Mevakal Baneha, and they heard the promises of V'Shavu Me'eretz Oyev Yesh Tikva La'Charitech V'Shavu B'Yam Levulam. Gedalya says this way we can help prepare the infrastructure for the end of 70 years of exile. It will be good. And Gedalya comes in front of everyone and Shehem, and he says, do not be afraid. I'll be the one to deal with the Babylonians. I have experience with them. All you have to do, it's the month of Elul. Please go. Atem esvu yayin v'kayetz v'shemen v'simu b'chlehem ushvu b'arechem asher tafastem. Pasuk Yud Aleph. וגם כל היהודים אשר במואב ובני אדום ובאדום ואשר בכל הארצות שמעו כי נתן מלך בבל שהביא ליהודה וכי יבכיר עליהם גדליה בן אחיקם בן שפן. All those who had run away, all of these refugees that had run away to the Transjordan started returning, saying, now we're going to be protected by the Babylonians under the governorship of Gedalya ben Achikam. This is already the beginning of Kibbutz Galiot. We're going to start our return to Eretz Yisrael already now. Vayashuvu kol hayudim mikol mekamot asher nidchu sham. Notice how Yirmiyahu employs a terminology from his nevuot of consolation. This is the time of Kibbutz Galiot. People were coming back. Vayavo Eretz Yehuda el Gedalya hamitzvata v'yaspu yayin b'kayetz harbein ma'od. And just think of the optimism. Just think of the hope that people have. Things aren't great, but they're getting better day by day. And can you imagine how we could have written history so much differently? Take a look. It all changes on Rosh Hashanah of that year. When Yishmael ben Netanya, who was, to give a little bit of background, not only is he from Zerah HaMlucha, but it explains a little bit of his very nationalist political position. He is anti the Babylonians. He does not want to surrender to Babylonia. He's been fighting in the fields against the Babylonians. His ancestors, his own parents, have been killed off by the Babylonians. His great-grandfather, Yehoiachin, now incarcerated in Babylonia. And Yishmael knows that if they win these wars against the Babylonians, then he's in charge. He's from Zerah HaMlucha. So Yishmael ben Netanya is against this political philosophy. He has been for years. He's a staunch nationalist. Mizera hamlucha b'rabei hamelech v'asara nashim ito Gedalya ben Achikam hamitzbata. So he goes to Gedalya, the pro-Babylonian party, vayachlu sham lechem yachta b'mitzvah, and it's Rosh Hashanah, and he comes under the guise that they're having a su'udat chag together. Vayakam Yishmael ben Netanya v'aseret hanashim asher hayu ito. And even though Yochanan ben Kareach, whom we're going to see is pro-Egyptian, had warned Gedalya not to be so naive, Gedalya was convinced the people are going to see again how a national unity government is the best for them. They're going to see how it pays to all join together in a proper coalition. And yet, after they eat together, Yishmael gets up, Vayaku et Gedalya ben Achikam ben Shaphan b'cherev, Vayamat oto asher hevkid melech Bavel b'aretz. We see that a national unity government apparently did not happen because Yishmael assassinated Gedalya. But kol hayudim asher hayu ito Gedalya b'mitzvah v'et hakasdim asher nimsu'u sham et anshe hamilchama hika Yishmael. Yishmael killed off all the Jews who were there, all the Babylonian soldiers who were there, and it's the second day, apparently at Rosh Hashanah, v'ish lo yada, no emails are going out, there are no survivors to tell the tale. But then the unexpected happens. Pasuk Hey, vayavo anashim mishchem, mishilo, mishomron, shmonim ish. But then there are 80 people who come from the north, and they're on their way to Yerushalayim. Because what else do you do on Rosh Hashanah than go to the Beit HaMikdash? And even though they know that the Beit HaMikdash is destroyed, they don't know any other way. We don't have the takanot of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai yet. They don't know how are they going to celebrate Rosh Hashanah. So they come with again signs of mourning. Megulechei zakan kroi begadim mitkodedim umerchau v'nabi adam nabi Beit Hashem. They're still going to come to Yerushalayim, to the destroyed Beit HaMikdash, to bring korbanot. Yishmael is not expecting these visitors. Yishmael comes out to greet them. And they come because they know Gedalya is there. And Yishmael says, yes, yes, come, let me show you Gedalya. And Yishmael ben Netanya doesn't want any survivors. He kills them as well. And he puts them in the bar. And we're all thinking of the story of Yosef ve'Achav. And we're all thinking of Sinat Chinam. And we're all thinking, we hear, not only that, but the Navi tells us, you want to know this bar, Pasuk Tet, Asher Hishulch Sham Yishmael lekol pigvei anashim asher hika b'yad Gedalya, hu asher asah hamelech asa mipnei Basha melech Yisrael. It's the same pit that basically existed 500 years earlier, when there was a civil war between Basha, the king of the north, and Asa, the king of Yehuda. And basically, we don't know if it's exactly the same pit. What the Navi is trying to tell you is that it's Sinat Chinam all over again. But there were 10 people who basically begged Yishmael for their life and basically said, we have all this food. You're going to need food to survive. And so take our food, but don't kill us. And because of this, Pasuk Yud, Vayesh Bishmael D'Kol Shevet HaMasher B'Mitzvah, Ebenot HaMelech, he took the remaining survivors of the Malchut and these 10 people, and they start running La'avor B'nei Ammon. He knows that the Babylonians are going to find out about this, and he's already had and secured guaranteed asylum in Ammon. The Ammonites allied with Yishmael, basically providing Yishmael with arms, providing Yishmael with support, ward off the Babylonians before they come to our lands. So Yishmael is on the way with a few survivors all the way to the Transjordan. And the Radak explains it's already now. It's the day after, K'mo Machar Chodesh. Even though Gedalya was killed on Rosh Hashanah, people only started finding out on Gimel, which is the day that we fast. Pasuk Yud Vayishma Yochanan ben Kareach, V'chol Sareach Hayanim Asher Ito. And now on Gimel Tishrei, the people hear what Yishmael did. Vayechu et kol anashim, vayechu leilachem im Yishmael ben Netanya. We're not going to let Yishmael get away with this. And they find him and they run after him to Givon, a place also of civil war between the forces of David, of Yoav, and the forces of Shaul and Avner. And when the people saw that Yochanan came to save them, they were so excited. And now they go to Yochanan ben Kareach. Yishmael continues all the way to Ammon. And Yochanan ben Kareach now has the people, and he is in charge. And he realizes, the Babylonians are going to hear about this. They're going to hear that their governor appointee was just assassinated, and they're going to retaliate. Yochanan himself was the head of another political party, and name it whatever you'd like, but it was a pro-Egyptian party, just like Yehoiakim, and later on Yehoiachin. And therefore he says, you know what we're going to do? We're going to go seek asylum in Egypt, because they're going to protect us. They've also been trying to ward off the Babylonians, as we know. And therefore they start going all the way down to Mitzrayim. And on the way down to Mitzrayim, they stop off in Beit Lechem. And the question is, obviously, why did they stop off in Beit Lechem? And on one hand, you could argue because from Mitzvah, it's a nice resting place. On the way down south to Egypt.
Weren't they in Givon, not in Mitzvah?
Sorry?
But weren't they in Givon, not Mitzvah?
So from Mitzvah, thank you, to Givon and Binyamin, and now going to Beit Lechem. So Givon also north of Beit Lechem. So they're on their way down south, all the way to Mitzrayim, because they're afraid of the Kasdim, and they're afraid that Melech Bavel is now going to punish them. So they go down to Mitzrayim. But they first stop off in Beit Lechem, Vayikshu kol sarei Chayamim, V'Yochanan ben Kareach, V'Zaniah ben Hoshaya, V'chol ha'am mikaton v'gadol, and they turn to Yirmiyahu HaNavi and they say, you know what, Yirmiyahu? 11 years before, we also stopped off. Our ancestors, those who went to exile to Babel, stopped off by Ramah. And there you spoke about, just yesterday, Kol b'Ramah nishma nihi b'chi tamurim Rachel mevaka al baneha. We heard that you quoted the cries and the tears of Rachel. So can you do that again? Can you pray on our behalf to Hashem Elokecha? And whatever it is that your God tells you, we'll listen. Yirmiyahu says, no, not if you phrase it that way. I'll pray to, not my God, but your God. Are you going to subscribe to Hashem Elokechem? And whatever I say in the name of our God, that's what you're going to do. V'hem amru el Yirmiyahu yihi Hashem banu le'ed emet v'ne'eman im lo kechol hadavar asher yishlachacha Hashem Elokecha eleinu kenaseh. Well, first let's hear what your God has to say. And then, yes, we'll listen. Im tov v'imra b'kol Hashem Elokeinu. Fine. Our God. Whatever our God says, we're going to listen to. Nishma b'kol Hashem Elokeinu. V'hi mikei taseret. And Barbanel explains, these are the days of Yirmiyahu davened. And he davened because the pendulum could sway in not either direction. Go to Galut, stay in Eretz Yisrael. You'll survive or you'll be killed. Mi lacherev, mi batzama, lachayim, ulemavet. These are Aseret Yemei Teshuvah. And he comes back and he says, you're never going to believe it. Do you want to know what Hashem said? Hashem said, during these days of Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, he gave such a message of Rachamim. Im sho tishvu ba'aretz hazot ubaniti etchem v'lo heros v'natati etchem v'lo etosh ki nichamti al ha'ra'ah asher asiti lachem. Hashem says, guess what? It's even better than the first nevuah of Rachel. They're going to go to an Eretz Oyev, but then I'm going to bring them back one day. No. Hashem says he's bringing you back right now. Stay here in Eretz Yisrael. When the going gets tough, the tough stay in Eretz Yisrael. Al tiru mipnei malach bavel asher tem yireim mipanav. Al tiru mimenu nom Hashem. Ki etzchem ani loshi etzchem latil etzchem yado. Don't worry. I can't explain to you how, says Hashem, but the king of Babylon, he is not going to retaliate. I will protect you. Ve'itein lachem rachamim. V'richam etzchem. Ve'yeshiv etzchem al admatchem. And if you don't want to stay in the land, I don't know why you wouldn't want to stay in the land, then I'm warning you that if you go down to Egypt, you're not coming back. Because that's what the Babylonians will definitely understand as an act of rebellion, and they're going to destroy you in the lands of Mitzrayim. Let's take a look and see how the people respond. You would think that they would say Baruch Hashem. You would think that they would start singing Shir HaMa'alot, V'shuv Hashem et Shivat Zion, Hayinu K'cholmim. Wow, we don't even have to leave. But take a look at their response. V'yomer Azariah ben Hoshaya, V'Yochanan ben Kareach, V'chol ha'nashim hazedim, Omrim el Yirmiyahu, Sheker ata medaber. They saw all the public commercials on television. Liar, liar, liar. Sheker ata medaber Yirmiyahu. You're lying. Lo shlachacha Hashem Elokeinu lemor lo tavo mitzrayim lagur sham. It can't be that Hashem didn't say that we should go down to Mitzrayim. Ki baruch beneria misitot chabanu. It must be that your scribe is turning you against us. Lo shamay Yochanan ben Kareach v'chosareach hayalim v'chol ha'am v'kol Hashem lashevet be'eretz Yehuda, and instead vayavo eretz Mitzrayim kalo shamu v'kol Hashem. And when they come, uva v'hikat et eretz Mitzrayim, Yirmiyahu says, I'll go with you. But I'm just telling you that none of us are going to survive. Asher lamadet lamadet, v'asher lashevi lashevi, v'asher lacherev lacherev. And the Rambam teaches us that when it comes to every ta'anit, the reason why we still continue to fast, the reason why Zachariah says it's not up to Hashem, it's up to you. Look back at history and see what went awry then, and ask yourself, how can I do tshuva? Ask yourself, are we any different than our forefathers, than our ancestors? Are we in a different situation wherein we have an opportunity to stay in Eretz Yisrael? But there's so much social, political tension. The reason we continue fasting, the reason Zachariah said, it's not up to God, it's up to you, is because we're the ones who have to learn how to improve the situation, to recognize what we did wrong. And what are these days? The very first day that he mentions on the calendar, Be'elohim Yom Shlishi B'Tishrei, Shabo Nehara Gedalya Menachikam. And what was the tragedy? The last ember of survival in Eretz Yisrael was extinguished. And this was the end, basically, of any Jewish settlement in Eretz Yisrael that then started the entire path of Galut that lasted, as we know, albeit then, and not just 70 years, but those who never made it back, ever. So the question is, how can we change our ways? What are the solutions? So let's take a look. The Maharal said, well, that's why you need the cries of Rachel Imenu. And you have to heed the cries of Rachel Imenu. And that's why Rachel is buried, as we heard yesterday as well. Rachel is the way that we leave Rosh Hashanah with her perpetual tears. And she didn't make it to Ma'arat HaMachpelah. Lo haya etzel Yisrael shehim begalut shelahem koach hamekabet v'ma'ached otam. Because Rachel Imenu is the only one who could truly unify all of us. Because you want to know what Yirmiyahu was telling them, I'll cry and I'll mention the tears of Rachel again. Because Rachel knows how to elicit the rachamim of Hashem until we're all together again. Rachel cries even when Yehuda goes into Galut. Even when, as we see, the last of Malchut goes into Galut. Even though she's the mother of Ephraim, of Menashe, of Binyamin. But she's the Akeret Habayit, HaMekabetzet Yisrael. She's the one who reminds us of the power of unity. Varnech Luku Yisrael. And therefore, at the time of Galut, unfortunately, we need the power, not of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, not of Sarah, Leah, and Rivka. We need the power of Rachel. She is the Koach HaMekabetz U'Ma'asefet Yisrael. Then, how do we do this? We go and we cry by Kever Rachel, but it's more than that. We have to figure out a way that we can unify ourselves a little more. We look around and we realize, oh my, on this eve, Mamash, Erev, not just Yom HaKippurim, on this day of Tzom Gedalya, we're on the eve of 5 elections that are simply the manifestation of terrible internal strife of Am Yisrael. How can we change this? Because if we don't, then I'm actually more worried, not about 6th elections. I'm more worried about another Tzom Gedalya next year. How do we fix this? The Rambam tells us in Masechet Avot, that at the time of Yetziat Mitzrayim, at the time of Geula, Am Yisrael walked through the Yam Suf in numerous ways, because we are different and we have different political views, and no one's going to ask each other after this year who they're voting for. And because we know that there are different views, in Keshet Agol. He says, we walked through the Yam Suf like a rainbow. That was the tzura. That's what it means that Hashem separated, Ligzor Yam Suf Ligzarim. And the Ibn Ezra, the Pashtan, quotes Chazal, that Kriyat Yam Suf meant literally not just separating into two separate parts, but 12, as Chazal say. We're different, but we all walk in the same path, albeit on 12 separate lines of the rainbow with different colors. And even though we know that in Bereshit Parashut Aleph, one of the issues, as we know, by Kol ha'aretz safa achad u'dvarim achadim, and Hashem says, Heim am achad v'safa achad l'chulam, v'zeh hachilam lasot. Look at the dangers. And when there's safa achat u'dvarim achadim, and the Netziv explains, well, what's wrong with that? Nimsa hayu dvarim achadim shebenehem l'ro'etz, she'achlitu laharog et mi shelo yachshov keotam. Basically, the problem with Migdal Babel, isn't it beautiful when we're one people with one language? No, because that means that we don't tolerate any other speeches, any other opinions. And therefore, it's really up to the leaders, explain Chazal, Talmidei Chachamim Marbim Shalom Ba'olam. It's up to the leaders not to create greater political tension, but to create greater unity. Rabbi Sachs, Zechrono Levracha, would always say, this is how you know that Chazal had a sense of humor, that Talmidei Chachamim are the ones to bring Shalom Ba'olam. The leaders generally are the ones to encourage separate ideas, and very often they bring strife. So how are we supposed to create positive leadership that brings unity? How do we stop another Harigat Gedalya ben Achikam? Rav Koka, as we know, albeit was one who did not tolerate the lack of Shmirat Shabbat in Eretz Yisrael. He had a tremendous love for all of Am Yisrael, and he spoke extensively, recognizing that during his days there were two political parties that he saw as terrible, that there was so much strife between these two. And he explains as follows: Yesh toim shachoshvim shashalom ha'olami lo yibane ki em al yedei tzivyon echad b'diyot u'tchulot. Some of us are saying shalom, peace, unity. It will never happen because we all have to agree, and we all know that we're never going to agree. He says that's exactly what the Netziv says. We're not supposed to agree. We're not supposed to be uniform in thinking. In kach sharuim talmidei chachamim chokrim b'chachmo v'diyot. He says otherwise. Look at Talmidei Chachamim. Open up any Mishnah, any Gemara. They disagree on everything, one to the other. How are they supposed to be bringing Marbim Shalom Ba'olam? Then Mete Nochim. Ki HaShalom HaMiti Efshar Sheyavo La'olam. Ki Im Dafka Al Yedei Ha'erech Shel Ribui HaShalom. It comes with peaceful encounters one with the other. It comes with being able to espouse other people's opinions. Haribui Shel HaShalom Hu Shiyitra'u Kol HaTzdadim V'Chol HaShitot. The only way we're ever going to have peace is if we understand the different opinions, if we see the other sides. V'yitbaru ech kulam yesh lehem makom, and we understand where this is coming from and where that political stance is coming from. Kol achad lefi yerchom mikomod v'yano. I may disagree with that stance, but I understand where you're coming from. Lomar gadol shalom banayach shaya morel tzir guf echad gadol. And whenever we speak about shalom, it's at Talmidei Chachamim Marbim Shalom. And it's not about literally the quantity, it's about the quality of the shalom. Sha'az hayu advarim matimim loto harayon hadome. Hashalom tzarich davka ledvarim achadim b'shivui rayonot. You have to be able to give a place to each one of these ideas. And he continues on the top of page 6 and wrote, Ahavat Yisrael v'avodah shel hasanagori al haklal v'al hapratim enenu rak avodah harikshit levada. And we're all sitting here and we're thinking, okay, we're past that. Shani, we've heard so many shiurim about this topic. Of course, yes, we tolerate every member of Am Yisrael. I understand every different political party. I read all the editorials. Ki im miksoa gadol v'torah. Says it's not just about and us sentimentally feeling this or emotionally being able to relate to this. It means literally investing time and strength. Chachma amuka urechava rabat hanafim shekulam tzomchim v'yomkim milishot tal or Torah chesed. It means changing our educational system, changing the rubric of society. It means changing our political system. And we're all thinking, how do we do that? So let's go back to Tzom Gedalya and remember that the tension was all about how do we see our relationship with Eretz Yisrael. Maybe we should be nationalists and ward off the Babylonians. That didn't work out too well for Yishmael. Maybe we should be pro-Babylonian and see who our allies are and who's taking care of us, like Gedalya. He was assassinated. Yochanan ben Kareach, no, pro-Egyptian. Let's go to the second strongest empire of the time. They're going to protect us. But no, they were all assassinated there. Rather, Chazal teach us, Haro'eh Chlusei Yisrael Omer Baruch Chacham Harazim She'en datam domed zeh lezeh ve'en partzufeihem domim zeh lazeh. And Ula says, Ein Uchlusia b'Bava. The only way to really build a strong government is by bringing Am Yisrael to Eretz Yisrael. Zachariah was saying, you're responsible. These are Jews from Babel. They can go to Egypt. He says, by staying in Chutz La'aretz, you're responsible for us continuing to fast on Tzom Gedalya and on Tisha B'Av, but also on Tzom Gedalya. That stage number one is we all have to realize that, as many people say, students here for a year in Eretz Yisrael, many people say, what right do they have to go and rally and protest and they have to be living here. Our relationship to Eretz Yisrael is depending on us being here in Eretz Yisrael. When we're here in Eretz Yisrael, then we appreciate that on one hand, ein partzufeihem domim zeh lazeh. We're so different. And everyone in this room, I'm sure, shares different political views as to what the ideal Medinat Yisrael should look like. Well, we have one very, very strong factor in common, and that is that we all chose to be here. And that automatically warrants, explains the Gemara of Racha. Baruch Chacham Harazim. The Rambam explains that's why when you see numerous people all together in Yisrael Heim u be'eretz Yisrael, he says it's not at the Siyum Hashas in Madison Square Garden or in, where was it? It was in
Somewhere in New Jersey.
Somewhere in New Jersey.
MetLife.
MetLife.
Meadowlands.
It's not when they're in the Meadowlands that you say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Olam Chacham Harazim. And blessed be God. And literally, the wise one of all these people. But rather, where do you say it? Only in Eretz Yisrael. That's when we're a unified people. And that's when you can appreciate different opinions. And the Kesef Mishnah explains, why is it that the Rambam stipulated this bracha in Eretz Yisrael? Katav harav Manoach shelamad kan mitiita b'gemara ben zomara uchlusia b'har habayit, and he was able to say it. Mashma dafka b'Eretz Yisrael ad kan lo nihira te'im keini madafka b'har habayit ela badai ein misham raya klal demase shahaya kach haya b'hu adin ve'efshar shetam Rabbeinu. He says because afa pi sheyireh shishim ribo, even if there may be then 600,000 Jews living in a Chutz La'aretz, ein lehem din uchlusia. They're not considered a population because they don't have that unified front. I'm sure they also disagree hashkafically, politically. At least here in Eretz Yisrael, we have something that unifies us. And no one will disagree that, name whichever political party that you want. They're looking for the betterment of Am Yisrael in Eretz Yisrael. I can disagree in thinking of the way or what they think is better, but that's the ultimate goal. And therefore, stage number one of Achdut is our population here. Stage number two is being able to see one another. As Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, we hear Rabbi Eliezer says, "V'yom shamar HaKadosh Baruch Hu yikabu hamayim, bo bayom niklu hamayim, v'nasu 12 chalakim, Keneged 12 shvatim." A priori, at the time of B'riyat Olam, Hashem wanted us to come from 12 different shvatim. And that's why during the time of B'riyat Yam Suf, there were 12 different paths, Vayu ro'im elu et elu. but they were made from glass so that we could still see each other. We have to be open-minded, open-eyed enough to be able to see one another and care about one another, which is why Yirmiyahu says we're like a sepsura. What does that mean? Because when one lamb gets hurt, everyone else feels it. When one part of our body gets hurt, we all feel it. When one party, and perhaps is literally slandering another, it should bother each and every one of us. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, "Mashal bnei adam shayu yoshvim b'sfina," like people who were in a boat, and one of them took a drill and started drilling only under his seat. And now all of his friends asked, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Why do you care? It's not under your seat; it's under my seat." And they said, "Do you realize? Are you from Chelm? Hamayim olim umatifim aleinu et hasfina. We're all going to have to suffer the repercussions." Eob says this as well. "Amru lo chavirav ki yosifa chatato kasher beinenu yisbok atama speak beinenu et avonotacha." That we all were responsible one for the other. And therefore, we said just yesterday, what is the only way that we can truly recognize Hashem? V'yasu kulam aguda achat lasot retoncha v'levav shalim. Which is why we're each considered responsible. If we see other people sinning, and yes, we do have a responsibility to share our views that we truly think are the right views, are the Torah values with others, because Kol Yisrael arevim zeh bazeh. But how do we go about embracing other people's values and at the same time remaining strongly and staunchly committed to ours? Well, the answer is, Ben Zoma tells us, Ezu chacham halomim mikol adam. Don't be so stubborn that you can't learn from other opinions. Ezu chacham halomim mikol adam. We have history to learn from, but we also have one another to learn from. And Rav Kook explains, below shiur klal. You learn from every single person, because every machshava, you may disagree with this politically and say, "I can't believe that this party is willing to do this and willing to do that." But ain't machshava b'teila ba'olam klal. If there's an opinion, then there's truth to that opinion. It may not be what is the best opinion right now, but there's no machshava b'teila ba'olam klal. If it is created in this world, then it has some godliness to that opinion. And therefore, we have to be open to see and to understand different opinions, even if you don't necessarily think that it's the most truthful one, the application for now. Rav Nachman Mibreslov speaks about this as well. V'gam tzarich kol ha'adam ledaber im chaveiro b'yirat shamayim. And therefore, it starts from the way that we speak one to the other. To speak and to listen to each other with yirat shamayim. כדי לקבל התעוררות בליבו מהנקודה שיש בחברו יותר ממנו. If we can only start doing this and realize that there's what to learn from every single person. Too often we meet people, especially with those of different political or religious views, and we're so eager to share with them our opinions that we don't even give them the time to express theirs. We're so ready to argue that we don't even have the patience to hear what they have to say. The malachim are mekablin din min din. They take one from the other. Malachim, these incorporeal beings that don't even have a yitzer, and they take one from the other. Why can't we start appreciating a little bit of the godliness that's endowed in each person? V'shan b'hanikudah hazot, he says, that's shorah ha'ava. That's where true love is. And we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu this every day, Tatzilinu mekinat ishmereinu, lo yale kinat adam al libeinu, v'lo kinatenu al achirim, and Tein b'libeinu shenir'eh kol echad malat chaverinu, v'lo chesronim. We don't ask Hashem, make sure that we see. It's Tein b'libeinu shenir'eh. Hashem, please give us the koach, give us the patience, give us the resolve to be able to see all of the wonderful attributes of each one of the political candidates, of each one of the sarim in the Knesset, and not their chesronot. Don't worry, we'll know what their chesronot are through their actions. But please let us see the good. Rav Kook tells us, that's midat ahava hashruya v'nishmat tzadikim. That's why a tzaddik can contain so many other people. Because einam motzia min haklal shum davar v'lo am v'lashon afilu amalek. Isn't that something? A tzaddik knows that he has to destroy Amalek, but at the same time, he appreciates what Amalek has to offer to this world. That is a high level, he says. Yisod hashalom ba'achdut ben bnei adam yitzuyar al pi shnei ofanei hadrachot. He says, I recommend these two practical approaches, he says. Ha'achad sha'adam makir shu chavrati b'tivo. Number one, we should recognize that we're social beings and that we're not meant to live with one political party. And that we're not meant to, as we know, we can go off to an island, a deserted island, and what's going to happen? We're going to build two shuls, that's right. One that we go to and one that we don't. And that's how humans work. He says that's a good thing. He knows that he can never achieve anything in this world if he acts alone, and therefore he's going to need to engage with other people. And we like engaging with other people. And we didn't like Zoom as much because we were all in our separate homes. Some are saying, no, we did like it, right? But we like seeing everyone else in their homes. But what happens when everyone blacked their face out? No. We like being able to see the godliness in every person. He says that's seeing what Hashem really wants in our own nation. For us to get along then. That's how we'll accomplish the most. So we have to understand that God wanted this from us a priori, to get along one with the other. Not to agree one with the other, but to get along. Really, we have to realize that it's better for us if we love ourselves. Then we're going to reach beyond ourselves because we'll be better human beings. We'll be better selves when we engage with others. And the more time goes by, the more we're going to recognize this. And what Rav Kook said so beautifully, believe it or not, the Bila said it as well. And that even though there's space between us all, and the people who hide themselves behind the wall of illusion never glimpse the truth, and it's far too late when they pass away. We were talking about the love we all could share when we find it, to try our best to hold it there with our love. With our love, we could save the world, if they only knew. Try to realize it's all within yourself. No one else can make you change. And to see you're really only very small. And life flows on within you and without you. And we have to understand that there's so much life beyond us. And there will be a greater sense, not just of accomplishment, there will be a greater sense of self-realization if we engage with those around us, particularly with Am Yisrael. Rav Kook says there's special power to Knesset Yisrael that connects us all through kochot gashmiyim and ruchaniyim. And therefore, even though in his day, Domelanu, Shenenu Mecholakim L'Shnei Machanot, there was only the labor and the Likud in his days. Tamid Regilim L'Tatzel Etzleinu B'Shnei HaShemot HaMavim Et HaKal Shalanu B'Chlal. He says that just like also there are Charedim and Chovshiyim, right? Today we would say Chilonim. And he says, and everyone stereotypes one another, and I can't have anything to do with this person. He says, but keep going on. Odi Kushini Mashu no Kalmin Harishon. It's almost as if we did something worse. Not only do we stereotype the other, we put a kir barzel, literally an iron curtain between us, between machaneh and machaneh. But then you're limiting the amount of achdut elokit hakdosha hamukrechet liot shoral Yisrael hagoy kulo. You're limiting the amount of literally the immanence of Hashem in this world. Harei kimo mitalemet me'inenu. And then we become darkened. With all of this, we're like a blind people searching in the darkness. If only we can start lifting up these curtains of division and see each other a little more. and allow for greater revelation of Hashem to come into this world. Doesn't make a difference who we're voting for. Doesn't make a difference. And within the realm, he says, of Am Yisrael, calling someone X, calling someone Y. Rather, it's about seeing ourselves. Why can't we just call everyone a member of Am Yisrael? Because then we can work together. He says, let's try this, the top of page 9. And yes, I know there are many sources, and it's a long fast day, so a lot to review. Et shem kachi al tachalalu, herafu me'af, hitlamdu lahabit ish el achiv. Today, start today, look at people more, each one. Look at them as your brother. Miflaga al miflaga, regardless of a political party. Be'inayim shel achim chomlim. These are the days to look all with compassionate eyes. Because we're all in the same boat. And all of our tax money is going to this election. And can we start preserving a little bit of our respect, of our self-respect? Do we want the world making more fun of us, saying, look at these people, they can't get their act together? After 5 elections? Come on. For all of our sakes. For Am Yisrael's sake. How do we do this? We create Achdut. The Rambam tells us, you have to do something to change. Yes, it's true, Yishmael and Yochanan and Gedalya didn't really agree. Do something different. Hevei mekabel et kol ha'adam b'sefer panim yafot. Hevei mekabel et kol ha'adam b'simcha. You know what? This one is really easy to start with. Rav Matya ben Chayvei Shomer, Hevei maksim b'shalom kol achad. Kol adam. Be the first one to say hello. Greet everyone. Not difficult. That's stage number 1. They said about Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai, tremendous Hamlachacham, he knew everything. Everything in Mishnah, Gemara, Halacha, Agada, Tukei Torah. What is he most known for? He knew Sichat Malachei HaSharet, Sichat HaShedim, Sichot Dekalim. But what he was most known for is that he was Manchil o Ha'ahava. And they say of Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai, Shelo hiktimo adam shalom olam, afilu nachri bashuk. Right, there are stories of the Holocaust. Right, good morning. Right, good morning. This Nazi who in the end saved people's lives because he would say good morning to him. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said hello to everyone. Tremendous gadol. And he was makdim shalom. You would never get to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and get a hello before him. He would say shalom even to the Nachri Bashuk. Rav Steinsaltz explains, Mishu Shani Makir Siperli, Shu Pagash Mishu B'Makolet. He says, a story, a man met a Jew from Russia in the Makolet, who amar la kama milim, vaz mizmin et atzmo lebayit shel hayudim Russia. And he invited himself over to this Jew's house, and he came with his wife. Hitparer shayudi nasui. And this man from Russia was married. Ha'olam Russia amru l'orcheim, anachnu chayim po 5 shanim. We've actually been living here for 5 years. With regard to Parnasa, we've been doing okay. We both have jobs. But you should know, after being here for 5 years, you're the very first people who have come to visit us. His friend spoke to Rav Steinsaltz, and he says, wow. Haya lezuk hazeh ben, bachur gadol, aval in pigur. Shora torachim hu machak apayim b'simcha, omar Abba, Abba, gam lanu yesh krovei mishpacha. The little acts of chesed that we do. Saying hello to someone, going over to visit someone, shows that we're really all part of one family. Even more than one family. Shlomo tells us in Mishlei, Kamayim hapanim lapanim, ken lev ha'adam la'adam. We're a reflection of each other's selves. As Rashi tells us, Chavero lefi ma she'adam yodea, she'chavero a'oravo ken hu mareh lo panim. Because our friends, everyone around us, reflects who we really are. The only way that we're ever going to be able to bring people closer to God is through the level of shalom in that generation. And says everyone knows this. Shalom, and you're thinking that that's an ideal utopian society, so start. to show that you care about people. Smile, say hello. Be happy with other people. Because this, Zachariah says, is what you need. He says, I'll tell you what. You want to know whether this Beit HaMikdash is going to last. You want to know how to ensure the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash? He says, I'll tell you more than that. I'm going to tell you how you can cancel all the fast days. Tzom HaRabi'i, Shavas Tammuz, Tzom HaChamishi, Tisha B'Av, Tzom HaShvi, Tzom Gedalya, the Tzom HaSiri, Asara B'Tevet. Yeh lebeit Yehuda l'sason u'l'simcha. They'll be transformed into days of happiness. U'lemoadim tovim. All you need to do, v'ha'emet v'ha'shalom echad. My chatima.